Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Silly Cult Claims, the series where we look at the silliest of claims made by cults and New Agers alike and show just how silly they really are. Now I did just say episode 2, that's because this is the second part of a collaboration that I'm doing with the Prophet of Zod. Episode 1 went out on Prophet of Zod's channel this morning, there's a link for that in the description by the way, but don't worry, you don't have to watch these in any particular order, you can watch that one after this one. You're not going to be confused by anything, you're not missing out on anything. Seeing as we did episode 1 over on Zod's channel, it felt only right to invite Zod over to my channel to do episode 2 on here. Now if you haven't heard of the Prophet of Zod yet, I find that highly unlikely, but if you haven't heard of the Prophet of Zod yet, what are you playing at? He does videos picking apart Christian nonsense from an atheist point of view, and actually this series, Silly Cult Claims, is based on Zod's series, Dumb Things People Say to Atheists. I cannot recommend his channel enough. Thanks for joining me, Zod.
Hey, and thanks for letting me be here. It's been interesting learning about New Age stuff because it's just as weird as Christianity, but seems even weirder because it's new. I look forward to digging into it a little more.
So, let's get down to it. On this episode of Silly Cult Claims, we're going to be looking at the phrase, "What you resist persists." Let's play that intro. So the law of attraction is based on the premise that you can have anything you want just as long as you believe that you can have it enough. But what happens when that goes wrong? What happens when you can't manifest the things that you want, or you keep manifesting things that you don't want? Well, then they whip out this doozy. What you resist persists. It basically means that if you're focusing on what you don't want, then you're going to law of attract that instead of the things that you do want. So basically stop resisting what you don't want and focus on what you do want, and then you'll get it. That's basically the idea, right? I mean, this makes total sense, right? This is a fantastic waterproof idea, right? This is not total bollocks, right?
Well, it sure seems that way, seeing how it's about controlling the universe with your mind and stuff. But where the law of attraction was at least pretty straightforward, think about what you want hard enough and it happens, unless you want a pony apparently. Adding this resist persist stuff in kind of convolutes everything. I mean, they made it sound like using the law of attraction takes a certain amount of effort or at least deliberate focus, right? The skill has to be refined over the course of your life. With the help of cult leaders, coaches who you have to pay, whose secrets you facilitate with your donations. And even then, it doesn't always work precisely. Am I off track here?
You sure you're new to this?
Well, I grew up evangelical, and I guess a lot of it's the same shit with a different name, so... Anyway, somehow as much as you have to try to make the law of attraction conjure good things, you can just kind of accidentally stumble your way into law of attractioning bad things into existence. Is that roughly the idea?
Yep. Contrary to the central doctrine of the law of attraction and how simple it seems when someone like Esther Hicks says you can have, be, or do anything you want, there's rules to it. And be careful because every thought is so powerful. You don't want to law of attract the wrong things. You don't want to law of attract bad stuff now.
Yeah, of course there are complicating rules, because you need them when you're making stuff up. But I guess the counter to my objection could be that unsuccessful people actually fix it on the negative as much as successful people fix it on the positive. But this just sounds like a catch-all to make your practice accommodate anything that ever happens to people. And it's kind of a shitty one too, because it automatically puts blame on people when anything goes wrong. It was never a string of bad luck, unproductive personal habits, or new skills you might need to learn. And it certainly wasn't that the law of attraction, doesn't work. It's just because you were a negative Nelly, and if you'll just quit being so negative, maybe things will work out better for you. It sounds like the system of preemptive excuses any pyramid scheme or religion has ready for when it doesn't work.
Something a friend of mine, Jess, said recently was that she wonders whether the law of attraction really is just like a big old fundamental attribution error. With that in mind, it bears looking back at the origin of the phrase. So I did a bit of digging, and it turns out that it may be that this came from Carl Jung, and when he said it, he said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." But bear in mind, he means that in terms of psychology. He means that in terms of what he called the shadow, not necessarily spooky laws of the universe, as far as I know. And to be clear, what I think Jung means when he mentions the shadow is that the darker parts of a person's personality, the stuff that they're not consciously aware of moment to moment. And as far as I'm aware, what he's referring to is that if you ignore or fight certain parts of yourself, then they may get stronger. Following this line of thinking, the better idea may be to make peace with these parts of yourself so that they lose their power over you and they can be integrated. True to law of attraction form, this idea is taken to apply outside of its original context and superimposed over the universe because, according to the law of attractions, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings have the capacity to create or very strongly influence your reality. Now, there's no evidence to support this assertion as far as I'm aware at all, but it doesn't stop the law of attractionists attempting to use the same old studies which don't support their beliefs to support their beliefs.
This sounds like a lot of the same thing we dealt with in part 1, which is talking extensively about how a thought or attitude you hang on to can affect your outlook on life, then at the end quickly adding, by insinuation of course, oh, and this also means you control the universe with your mind, so that readers associate everything you said, and any supporting studies, as proving the point. So yeah, in this case, we're basically just talking about how people resolve internal tension, either by struggling with it directly or coming to peace with it and incorporating it into a constructive thought pattern. So unless you can actually prove this has anything to do with controlling the universe with your mind, sit down, shut up, and let qualified psychologists deal with what's really just issues of psychology.
Now, if you've been to this channel before, then you'll know that vague advice offered generally is my favorite kind of damaging. I can think of numerous ways that can lead to pain. I don't think I need to list them. I think it's abundantly clear. Just 5 minutes of thinking about this outside the box can show you exactly what I mean, I think. Remember that law of attractionists apply this to feelings, to thoughts, to emotions, or as they call them, vibrations and frequencies, which in this context are nonsense words, by the way. However, I wouldn't say that what you resist persists is never applicable. I think under certain circumstances, I could see how it could be applicable. As in, if you don't like that something exists and then you resist the fact that it exists, which in this context is basically just ignoring that it exists, then it could get worse. That's one of the reasons that there's so much of this channel is dedicated towards spotting red flags for destructive cults. But then equally, the opposite of what you resist persists is also true, because if you don't take steps to improve certain situations, which is resisting that situation, by the way, then how else is something going to improve? And of course, so yeah, from a law of attraction point of view, they're going to say things like, well, when you release resistance to it, when you find peace for it, when you find acceptance for it, then it is automatically going to get better because your vibration is going to improve. I call bullshit on that. If you release resistance to sickness and chronic illness, you don't get better. It might make it easier to bear, but it's not a cure. Equally, if I release resistance to my chair leg falling off, a new chair leg isn't just going to magically attach itself, is it? Like, yeah, okay, there might be a slight improvement in my emotional state when I acknowledge that there's a problem rather than just ignoring that there's a problem. But that's such a banal truism that it's hardly worth mentioning at all. That said, it is somewhat similar to the idea of the second arrow in mindfulness, which is grounded in a reasonable approach to the reduction of suffering rather than wishy thinking, quantum magic, and the universe.
You really hit the nail on the head there, Andy. Basically, these teachings take one core truth about how we should deal with a situation. For example, we shouldn't constantly work ourselves up over things we can't control, and try to build an entire approach to life out of it. But you just can't deal with life that simplistically. Using your example, if your chair breaks, no, you shouldn't fly into a rage and throw it against the wall and sit there sulking over how broken it is. That's not constructive. But you know what's also not constructive? Failing to confront the reality of the broken chair and take steps to deal with it. As sure as sitting around thinking negative thoughts about the chair won't fix it, sitting around thinking positive thoughts about the chair will do just as little. Yeah, it will put you in a healthier state of mind. But that's all it accomplishes. Like you said, you need to feel some resistance, because that discomfort is what prompts you to change. And to do this, you need to spend some time facing up to and contending with the resistance. The key is to do it in a healthy way to a healthy extent, then reconcile yourself to your situation as much as you need to, or change it as much as you can. But this what you resist persists teaching seems to pretend that overreacting to resistance is the main if not only problem, and that the best way to solve it is to just stop reacting. Which, ironically, is overreacting to overreacting.
So looking back at the mental emotional side of this, Eckhart Tolle's version of the quote goes, wherever you fight, you strengthen, and what you resist persists. So if you're talking about thought patterns and anxieties, sure. If you're talking about what's going on inside your head. But to take steps to relieve your anxiety, you're still resisting it, but you're getting rid of it. Like you're fighting that it's there. You don't want it to be there. You still are resisting it, and yet you are getting rid of it. Even if in the moment there's like a feeling of not resisting what's happening to you, not resisting the feeling, the overall approach is still one of resistance to the state of anxiety, resistance to the feeling of anxiety, whatever it is. I guess you could say, but then you're not resisting it anymore, you're accepting it. But at that point, what does resistance really even mean? You've dropped the definition, you're starting to move the goalposts then. I wouldn't say that the opposite of resistance is acknowledgement though, or acceptance. I would say maybe a push, the opposite of resistance might be allowing, which coincidentally is the opposite of what you want to do if you've got a problem that won't get better if you ignore it, or a problem that will get worse if you ignore it. And if you're talking about like building muscle or skill, then I guess I could see how that would apply to like if you're having like a full-on fist fight with someone, like you're actually fighting with someone, then maybe that would help them build muscle, right? But then how is that useful for a pacifist breatharian new ager who's tired all the time? And if you're talking about debates and arguments, then I guess there's certainly a case for cognitive dissonance strengthening a person's position, making them double down. But you can reduce that somewhat, especially if you're able to understand the other person's point of view and tailor your approach to what they're thinking and feeling, to deliberately attempt to avoid or reduce the effect of cognitive dissonance, get through to them and have a proper conversation rather than an argument. Especially if you're taking that time to understand the other person's point of view and then dismantle it. All important nuance that's missed when you just say something as simple and general as what you resist persists. If a statement is so vague that it could kind of be true in like a bunch of ways, but then in other ways it's not applicable, true, or relevant at all, I would say it's borderline not worth saying. In fact, we have a word for things like this: deepity. What you resist persists is a deepity, and it is a silly cult claim. Check out Prophet of Zod's channel. There's a link in the description, and the first episode of this series is also over on his channel as well. There's a link to that in the description below as well.
Thank you, Andy, and thanks for letting me join you.
Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons, one of whom, Manal, would like me to tell you that I've been frolicking, playing, prancing among the leaves, but I'm not going to give her the satisfaction. If you want to help support the channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon, like all the wonderful people that you'll see listed at the end of the video in just a second. Just for now though, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel to see more videos on destructive cults, damaging norms, and just generally bad ideas. This has been episode 2 of Silly Cult Claims. I'm going to end the episode now by saying this: please be kind and ask good questions. I'll see you in the next one.